So one of the first things that I learned when my daughter first arrived is that babies are very Boolean creatures. So they're either crying or not crying. Now, when they are crying, it's generally because they have an unmet need. So either they're hungry, they're cold, or any number of things. And what I was wondering is, pretty quickly on, is well, what I basically need is a checklist of things to check when she was crying, of what it is that she needs. Because as soon as we found that one thing, she stopped crying. And this is quite analogous to what you have when you're creating a product. You're entering into a completely new market with it. There's a whole set of unknown, unmet demands in any market that you choose. And usually, those are the bits that are most important for you to know when you do start creating an actual product. Now, the thing that many people might not may miss is that there's, depending on which particular group of people you choose and which particular need that you go after, there's certain needs where a very high percentage of a particular subgroup of people are going to respond if you offer them something. So there's a very high need, a high latent demand in a particular niche for a particular type of solution. And the earlier that you can identify those, the better off you'll be, the more successful your product will be, regardless of everything else that you do, including creating the actual product. So here's a couple of examples within tech of where you tend to have quite high unmet demand. So either niches that are overlooked, such as, for example, when Netflix came in with online video, put companies like Blockbuster out of business. Add-ons. So while an operating system does certain things, it doesn't cover everything. So an antivirus software will do quite well. Or specialized alternatives. So, for example, even though you have Excel, there's certain specialized software that goes after, say, investment managers. Now, stepping back a bit, according to Startup Compass, the most common reason for startup failures, for tech startup failure, is premature scaling. So, basically, there's a number of assumptions that they're making, and they put their foot on the accelerator and start going really fast and throwing lots of money at it and lots of people without actually being sure that what they think is true is actually true. At the product level, according to Alex Osterwalder, a little over 4 out of 10 products fail because a product is built that nobody wants. So basically, the people building the product are ignoring what that particular market they want to go after actually wants. So the typical tool within the product world, the lean startup world, is the business model canvas or variations of it. And you can gather data on certain parts of the business model canvas quite easily using landing pages. And this is what I'm going to focus on today. So one of the traps as product people that is quite easy to fall into is that when you do customer interviews or interact with customers, there's a natural tendency for people to tell you what you want to hear. And even though they say certain things, that doesn't mean they're actually going to act on it. So once you the only way to really find out whether they are going to take action is put them in a situation where they need to take action, such as, for example, with a landing page. Because most of the factors actually driving the action are subconscious ones, coming off of first impressions and how those first impressions map to unmet needs. So for example, I wrote a book called Launch Tomorrow about this topic. And the reason I wrote it is that when I did put up a landing page to collect emails to see if people would be interested, I had over 20% of people opting in to find out more for me to follow up. And I was looking at other possible topics, but this was clearly the one with the most unmet need. And when I did end up launching it last November, it did quite well. So the way I've broken this down is that first I'm going to look at a specific example of how you can quantify demand. Then look at how you can use that to reduce risk. And then we'll look into how to actually capture value using these landing pages. So have any of you heard of these companies before? Exceptional and Air Story? Okay. So essentially, they came about to handle a very specific problem. So when developers are working on a live production website, especially one that's on a site that's growing very quickly, they have lots of errors. And typically what would happen is that the developers would be getting emails, and as the website would scale up, each time there was a problem, they'd be getting hundreds, if not thousands of emails, all similar but not exactly the same. So essentially what Exceptional and Air Story were trying to do is to create a plugin for developers where they could put it into their site and actually get occasional emails, but ones that were actually actionable for them. Now, a guy named Jonathan Siegel decided that he might be interested in getting into the error handling market effectively. So he wanted to look at the actual economics of how this looks from the point of view of a product owner as an entrepreneur. And first thing he checked is the market large enough? So this is a hypothetical example, but looking at the same area using today's data. So there, every month there's around 638,000 searches on website exception handling software or related terms on Google. So assuming that he can get 1% of those people to click on an ad, if he built a site or a landing page, he'd have 6,000 visitors a month. A little over. Now, of those 6,000 visitors, if he assumes that he can get at least 2% to buy his product just first time they see it, that would mean that effectively the cost of acquiring one customer would be £33. So as long as he's, so that would mean off of that audience size, he can assume to be making at least 127 sales a month. Now let's say he offers a product where it's an annual subscription to an error handling component for £99. He's acquiring customers for 33, which means just in terms of gross profit, directly off of marketing costs, he's making 66, which at 127 sales works out to a little over 8,000 a month. Which isn't bad, but these are all assumptions. In the same way that when you first sit down and write out your business model canvas, these are all assumptions about how your business is going to look. And yes, it's driven on, you're using data from Google, from wherever, to get that initial set. But the key one is actually the conversion rate, and he doesn't have any data for that. So the only way to really do that is to go out and find out whether or not he can get people to buy, people who he pays £33 for, to buy for more than that. Because that means that it's actually a profitable business idea. Notice how we haven't talked at all about creating the product yet. So what this landing page MVP gives him is that it gives him an actual market size an actual conversion rate, which you can't get from anywhere else, based on that particular landing page, and an expected profitability of the business without writing any code. Now let's say he does this. Yeah, go ahead.
In my experience, you might need to explain what MVP is because people misunderstand the term.
Sure. So MVP, yeah, thank you. MVP stands for minimum viable product, and it comes from the lean startup world. And the idea is that there are prototypes or certain parts of a product that you use to test a specific assumption that you have about your audience, about your product, and you use that to learn more and build out the actual product later. And that's the idea behind an MVP. So in this particular case, I'm talking about landing page MVPs. So you're using one web page to present the product to a potential customer. So let's say he does this test, and he doesn't get the 2% that he was expecting. He gets 3.5% of the people who come to his site off of the ad to actually buy the product. So there's more of an unmet need than he thought there was, which effectively means he's already got an expected profit of $22,000 a month.
Sorry, I missed a bit, but how did we get to testing the assumption? Is it the 2% assumption? Yeah, they assume 2%.
Yes.
How do we now test this assumption?
He puts up a landing page. So the question is, how did he actually get these numbers? He puts up a landing page. He buys some ads, some paid advertising. He drives 6,000 people over the course of a month to that landing page, and 3.5% of the people actually pay for this software.
Okay, so what actually hit the button that takes them to the form that they then fill in with the expectation of handing over money for this software which doesn't yet exist?
Yes. Well, there's a couple of variations around exactly how it could be done. We'll go into that. But that's essentially where that particular number is from, 3.5%. So if it turns out that it's 3.5%, suddenly it becomes an even more attractive option as a business idea. Okay, sorry. Right. So. And this actual so this difference of starting in a niche that has a very high latent demand makes a very big difference to how the actual business can potentially look, and that's the critical importance of the conversion rate at this early stage, which you can't know without actually testing it this way. So what did happen? What did happen was that. Jonathan was approached by his friend who was running Exceptional to buy the business. And what he wanted to do is basically evaluate whether or not it's a potentially good business idea. So he put up this landing page for a company called Right Error and realized pretty quickly that yes, this is quite an attractive business to get into. So he did end up buying Exceptional and then later merged with AirScore. And exited for over 7 figures. So just to recap, this landing page MVP approach helps you validate actual audience size, how much they actually want what it is that you want to create, and how profitable that idea is potentially for you. So now let's talk about reducing risk. If you were in a situation where you're selling Megadeth tickets and you want to offer them to everyone that you possibly can, you're going to be reaching people like this lady over here who's very interested in her knitting, but let's say it's slightly unlikely she's going to be interested in a Megadeth concert.
You never know.
You never know.
Assumptions.
It's an assumption, yes. But statistically speaking, you wouldn't expect her to. And it's much better for you to narrow on a specific group of people that are much more likely to buy. And the reason I'm pointing this out is there was a study done by Ogilvy and Mather Direct where they did a 12-cell test varying audience, offer, what was offered, and the creative, so basically what's on your landing page. And the variation in actual sales, these are for completely new products, in that particular case, was 62% by varying audience. Whereas the creative, meaning the landing page, only accounted for about 12% variation in the actual sales. So this is how important user research, personas, and your audience, and choosing your audience actually is when you're going into a market. So what I would say, what I would posit, is that your riskiest assumption, if you're going into a for-profit business, especially at first, is probably going to be around your audience. So either how big it is, or what it is they actually need, not what you think they need, or how relevant what it is that you want to create is for them. And the best way to do this in a systematic way is doing hypothesis tests. So going back to what Linda was talking about, and creating a test where you say that if 12 out of 20 people say that this is their main issue, that gives you a good sense of, yes, this is actually what the situation is. And that effectively functions like a real put option. So you invest a bit of time and money up front to talk to your audience, which then significantly reduces your downside. So the worst case scenario is you lose that slight amount of effort up front, but you then make sure that you don't have a massive loss of spending 2 years building a product that nobody wants, which is pretty common. And what this effectively does is quite similar to how Michelangelo approached sculptures. So he would see a rock and then chip away bits and pieces of the rock and help what was inside that specific rock to express itself in the best possible way. And there tends to be a lot more of the stuff that's irrelevant of looking at it from the point of view of your initial general idea than you probably think. So, okay, again, example. This is part of a case study from Dropbox. Now, Dropbox is famous for initially proving their idea using an explainer video of their product. But they did also do some experiments specifically with paid advertising to see if they could grow their business using paid advertising, using a similar approach to what we were talking about with Exception. So they basically hired a search engine marketer, spent about $3,000 on paid advertising, and also offered an annual subscription to Dropbox. This is very early days. This isn't now. This isn't recent. Complete failure, it turned out. It cost them at a minimum $233 to acquire one customer for a $99 product. But because they had actual people coming in and using their site, they could improve onboarding. They realized that a simple one home page meant that a lot more of the people who came to their site actually downloaded their software and installed it and started using their free trial. They also had people using it, so it was much easier for them to collect feedback within the product itself as they were building it out. So even though they lost this $3,000 to run this test, in terms of growth, they actually gained a lot of certainty in the context of building something that people actually wanted. So essentially, this market intelligence de-risked their product development. It's like that line when you're jumping off a cliff. Now, what I would argue is that if you possibly can, try to prove that a product or even a feature, if it's important enough, is worth building before